Welcome back to another edition of Husker Huddle here at the Husker Sports Network. I'm your host, Jeremiah Searles. Today we are joined by former Nebraska wide receiver, one of my good friends, came into Nebraska together in 2009, Brandon Kinnie. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing well, my brother. I really appreciate you having me on, man. Seriously,
Absolutely. So I was lucky enough to run into Brandon. Actually, he was, if I recall, you were late to the Nebraska Greats Foundation, but we won't get into that. I remember you were walking into the thing late. I was like, I think that's BK. But we got a chance to run into you, and you've been doing awesome since you decided to hang up the cleats, since you left Nebraska here. And you just were very open and honest with me about what you were doing. So I thought it'd be great to get you here in Nebraska. I know you live here in Omaha. And just talk a little bit about what your journey's been like since you hung up the cleats and where you've been and what you've been up to, buddy.
Man, absolutely. Well, I mean, hanging up the cleats was obviously one of the toughest things for me. And I didn't feel that I really got the true chance to really go out there and play in a sense. But it was a good ride, and it was needed for my journey as of now looking at hindsight. But during that time, I mean, it was good. Like I said, it was ups and flows. It was ups and downs during that process. But after I finally decided to hang them up, it was just a huge process of just growing up, man, and becoming a man. And it's so funny. You think that you're all of these things, right, until, like, the real world hits. And it's like, what is going on right now? But I used to pray for, like, a Pell Grant check to just pop up out of nowhere for me because I couldn't get the grasp of that real world life yet, man. So as I figured it out, man, and got further into it, man, I started to understand my purpose and my reasoning and my why. And it led me to surrendering my life to Christ, man. And it's been a great and an amazing journey since, man, because it's so funny that I thought that this football game was what I was shooting for. It was my purpose. It was my goal in life, and it wasn't even close, man. It wasn't even close, and it still blows my mind today to know, like, man, I did all of these things. I went through all these different paths and met all these different people to be here now, being a light, as a vessel being used through Jesus Christ. So, man, it's been awesome, man. It's been really, really great. I was just married, too, as well, about a year and a half ago. So that's right. So that's been amazing, man. Married life is very, very cool. I will say, yes, absolutely. Happy wife, happy life.
Oh, yes.
So out there listening, please listen up. But it's been great, man. I coached my youngest son football team for the Miller North Junior Mustangs. So I'm a head coach out here coaching that, and it's been phenomenal, man, being able to see this other side of it, the coaching side of it. And I never thought I would enjoy it this much, but, man, it's been so great to coach my little man, but also coach the next generation. And that's the coolest part about it, important to those young guys to now to grow up and go do the same, man. So it's been great, man. It's been a good time.
That's awesome. You touched on something I want to go back to, and you talked about how I think one thing that I learned too is if you let football be your identity, you become extremely lost when you do hang up the cleats. And I think you talked about it. I know I experienced it of even if you don't say football is your identity, it really is, because it's all you know. Yeah. And so with you, and I'd love to hear your process of how did you combat that? How did you combat that feeling of maybe like purposelessness, I think is the word I'm using for? Like you don't feel like you have that purpose, that driving factor when you do hang up the cleats. What were some things that maybe now you are teaching that younger generation so that they don't have to go through that? Or just little things that maybe you've been doing now that you are coaching youth and you are on the other side looking back. What are some tips or maybe what are some struggles that you worked yourself through there?
Oh, absolutely, man. I would say, Shirley, man, to be honest, I wish, and I talk about this all the time, I wish I would have had Christ in my life during school, during junior college, during college, because at that time I would have had purpose and understood that. But I look at it now and understand that the journey was for a reason, though. I needed to go through that. I needed to see those things. So I would say, for sure, having him at the head and perseverance, man. After football was over, it hurt. I was bothered. I envied a lot of my friends that played in my class that made it because I felt like I should have been there. So I was definitely at a low spot, but I just persevered at that time. Both my boys were born too as well. So it was knowing that it wasn't about me anymore. That was another big reason why I decided to hang him up, because I was going from, this state to this state, living out of a suitcase. And I said, you know what, man, like, it's going to get old after a while. And after a few more times, it was like, you know what, this was the route I took to have kids early. And this is what I have to figure out. I can't chase this dream until I'm 30 years old. So I understood that, man. And I had to be honest with myself about that and start that process and say that it's okay. So to look at it now, it was the greatest process ever, because I needed every step of it. I needed every single step to get me to where I am today, to have the knowledge, to have the understanding, now to have the light, to go out to proclaim the gospel, but to also teach the next generation, man. Show them how it's done, lead by example, and just pour into them, man. And it's great. It's great. And it's so good when they finally get it, man. And I get it now why so many coaches would be like, BK, just understand. I'm like, nah, coach, I'm good enough, dude. What do you mean I'm good? So it's like, I get it now. And it's like full of teeth. You're like, come on, see it. So, yeah, it's been great, man. It's been awesome.
That's incredible. I think it's funny you talk about the coaching. So Cody Green actually has moved back to Lincoln now, and me and him have been hanging out a lot. And we both went to a high school football game this past week, Friday Night Lights. I have to get a little football in your life, right? I mean, no Nebraska football. It's driving me nuts.
Exactly.
But I was sitting there watching the game, and I was just like, I think I'm going to need to coach when my son gets into high school football. And I text Cody Green, and I was like, I think you're going to need to be my offensive coordinator. And as through this conversation, it sounds like I may have found my receivers coach as well. So I'm fairly certain I'm just going to put together this group of former Nebraska players, and we're just going to coach high school and just run the state. So I think keep your eye on the lookout here in the next 17 to 18 years when my sons are rolling around and we're figuring it out. We'll have to get that together.
Absolutely, man.
I love that you're with the youth. I coach actually high school kids. I train some, but I think that it's really important that we train the next generation of football players, because I think that the generation, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong here, BK, but because of what the recruiting has become and because of what it takes to get kids to school, you put these kids on these pedestals. And I think that if you're not raised not raised but trained, I think is the right way, from a young age of like you have to work for everything, nothing is given to you, that a lot of that gets lost in this recruiting process, because you have to just sit there and basically like, hey, you're the best thing I've ever seen. And then you get to campus and it's like, hey, you got a lot of work to do. And they've never been taught that. Do you think that's a trend that's hitting Husker, or not just Husker, but all of college football, which is what you're seeing, the transfers and the leaving and all this, but like, how do you combat that, and how do you just really teach that as a young age?
Man, and it goes back to that perseverance word. It's so funny because the reason why I came to Nebraska wasn't because of any geek or anything special that they told me. It was just that these guys were real genuine guys. Like when I wanted to call and talk football, they wanted to call and talk life. How's this? How's your son? How's family? What'd you do here? Okay, now we're gonna talk football. Okay, how many blocks did you have downfield? How many running backs did you spring downfield? I'm like, man, I'm Coach Gilmore. I'm ready to tell you how many touchdowns and guys I still on. So for me, I feel like, again, growing up how I grew up, that was ingrained in me to just be that type of guy. But I do 100% believe that the geek has turned this thing around to where it's like, the whole hat unveil and this and that. And it's like, man, pick the school, get in there and go grind it out and do your thing. And that's my thing, is hard nosed. That's how Fort Scott was. When we got to Nebraska, that's how Nebraska was.
Yep.
In a sense. So it is sad to see when you do see kids transferring. I remember seeing a linebacker that transferred from Alabama a few years ago. And, like, I seen his name pop up somewhere, and I went in, like, I can't remember his name, but I dug a little deeper. And it's like he's transferred, like, 3 schools. He went from Alabama to Penn State to, like, Maryland. And it's like, dude, that's like giving your job resume, and you're just at a job for 3 or 4 months. And the employer is like, well, dude, you had 3 jobs in the past year, bro. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things, and you have to understand that. See, and they don't know that. They don't get that because you're not thinking resumes, real world. So it's hard to get an understanding in that, but that's where we come in to have to be able to be that bridge and explain it to these young guys and these young athletes of what this thing looks like, and how you're supposed to go about it. So I definitely love that perseverance word, because I think that's ultimately what it is just getting down there and grinding and figuring it out. Because I know when I got there, man, I didn't know the playbook. I didn't understand it, but I thought I was all world, right? I thought I can go out here and play with these guys. And it was like, look, BK, you can't play fast if you don't know this stuff. And it was black and white for me. It was no gray area. Mm-hmm. Like, you're good, you're athletic, yes, you're great, but you got to know this. So I think it's absolutely that, man, just pushing through.
Absolutely. I think that's a great segue here to talk a little bit about what this Husker football team might be this year. I mean, they've had to persevere through a lot. I mean, a lot of these guys, I mean, these seniors this year have had 2 head coaches. I mean, they've been through ups and downs and seasons that last year were expected to win 8, 9 games, and they win 4. I mean, it's been a lot. But, I mean, you live here in Omaha. You know the hype. You hear it every year. What were you kind of expecting, and what were you looking at, I mean, pre-COVID, obviously, for what this team could have been this year?
Oh, man, look, I was excited because of all the big wideouts that they signed. So, I was excited being a wide receiver guy, because I knew this offense was going to be explosive this year. And I felt like Adrian was just going to have a true comeback year. I feel like in that game, man, you can put a lot of pressure on yourself mentally. The social media, and it can get involved. And I feel like even for us during our time, that's when it kind of got momentum, and we were on there. And for me, it started messing with my mental, listening to people, what people were saying about it and things like that. So I was super excited to see it. I believe Scott is the guy 100%. And I believe that he is the guy that's going to be the bridge between the new style generation, but still that old school cultural, hard-nosed, we're going to get after it football. And I think he bridged the gap so well. And it was so funny. I seen him, man, it was me and Compton was at a game. I can't remember what game it was this last year. I mean, we just went into the training room, and we were talking to Mark for a little bit. This was like at halftime. And, man, I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. Number 5 is safety. I like him a lot. Is he from Colorado?
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, I should know this. It's Kinnie. He didn't play last year though, right? He was injured. Yeah.
He hurt his shoulder. Yeah,
yep.
He hurt his shoulder. Yeah. But he was in there, and he had just hurt his shoulder that game, or re-injured it. He was just in the training room, and Coach Frost came in there, and he talked to him, played with him a little bit, and I think his parents were there too. So he's like, "You gonna be all right? Okay, cool." And he's like, "All right, man, I love you, man," and walked off. And I'm like, "Wow, dude! Like, that's awesome, man! Like, that's building that, and that gave me the perspective." Being inside to say, like, okay, this guy is it, dude. He loved these guys, and he's pushing for them, and he's coaching them up. So it's awesome to see, man.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to talk with you about here before I let you go is you did the JUCO route, and you came in here, and you got, I mean, there is all eyes on Omar Manning, right? I mean, all eyes, #1 wide receiver recruit coming out of JUCO in the country. He's expected to step in and do a lot for this team right away. What are some things he's going to have to battle? I know you talked a little bit about the playbook and learning all that, but I mean, what were some of the biggest hurdles for you coming from JUCO to big-time Division I football?
Just not overthinking it. Not trying to compare your last playbook to your new playbook. Putting things together. This is the whole new thing, so you got to dive into this. I would obviously say spend as much time in the playbook room, or the room just studying and getting that down too well. But just having confidence in knowing too as well what you're called, like what you were brought there to do, to go out there and have fun, make plays, and be a big time receiver. And when you control what you can control, and let everything else, do what it do, man, you'll be more than all right. And a lot of things that I wish that I had and had an understanding of. Once I got to Nebraska, I figured it out later. But I wish I would have had it going in, opposed to thinking like, okay, I'm going to get in here and compete right away and do this. And it was like, no, man, this is a big curve, and you got to figure it out. You got to be humble to be able to understand that, and put yourself low enough to know, okay, these are the steps I have to take to get to where I want to go. So.
Yeah, man, I mean, when I was here, I know that we had a lot of success with JUCO guys that came in. I mean, yourself, Levante, Yoshi, Randy Gregory, Stanley Jean-Baptiste. I mean, we had a lot of success, and it seems like Nebraska's kind of lacked in that success from the JUCO transfer program here lately. Hoping Omar Manning can be the guy that gets us back rolling again, because we're going to need a big year out of him with no J.D. Spielman. So I'm hoping he can be that big body receiver like a Stanley Morgan type that we have. So,
Yeah,
BK,
yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on here on Husker Huddle here on the Husker Sports Network. Is there anything else you'd like to say to Husker Nation before we let you go?
Man, go Big Red always and forever, baby.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you forget, he's the hashtag Team Fill Up Your Timeline on Twitter. If you ever need anything, that's an inside joke. He was like the original tweeter back in the day, and he would tweet 100 times a day. So I had to throw that out there. But, BK, we appreciate you here. We're excited. I hope next time you come to a game, you hit me up. Will be a chance to catch you up.
Absolutely, man.